The input hypothesis. The input hypothesis is the second last hypothesis on which Stephen Kreshen's monitor model depends. Now, what is this input hypothesis? Input hypothesis is linked to the natural order hypothesis. It claims that we move along the developmental continuum when we are learning a language. That is, whenever we learn a language, we follow a specific developmental route, and everyone has to pass through the same stage. But it all depends on the comprehensible input that we receive on our way to learning the language. If comprehensible input is critical, we need to know what do we mean by comprehensible input. Comprehensible input would mean that we should provide our learners with a language input or second language input which is a little beyond or a step ahead of the learner's current competence in the second language. For instance, if we say that the current stage at which the learner's second language is I, then the comprehensible input that the child would need would be I plus 1. So let's go and have an example to talk about this. We are saying that if a child has already covered or knows 2-letter words, then the child will be able to understand 3-letter words or learn 3-letter words if the child is given exposure to that. This is what we mean by comprehensible input. But let me correct a little slip of tongue over here that Kreshen always makes this distinction between learning and acquisition. And acquisition is something that is acquired in natural settings. So all this discussion is about acquisition and not about learning. Kreshen also argues that if the comprehensible input is too simple for the child, that is, it is something that the child already knows, or if it is too difficult for the child, then the acquisition will not take place. It also claims that when a child speaks a language, that is the result of acquisition, and it does not actually lead to acquisition. So speaking helps or does not help a child to learn or acquire a language. Rather, the speech of the child, or when the child uses a second language, that is a testament of his or her learning a second language. He also argued that speech cannot be directly taught, and it has to emerge from the acquisition itself. It argues that speech in any case has to emerge from the comprehensible input, or an input that the child can understand, but it is a little beyond his or her present level of proficiency that will lead to speech. He also argues that if sufficient comprehensible input is provided, then the child does not need to be exposed to grammatical rules, and the acquisition of the language will become automatically be a result of the acquisition of the language. Now, what are the classroom implications if we think of our students? So the classroom implication of such a hypothesis would be that the learning of the rules would not help the students, and only if the learners are given exposure to this comprehensible input, that is an input which is a little beyond the understanding of the learners, yet not too beyond the learning of the learners, the language will be acquired.